It was a nice day, you know, a sunny day as far as the weather, so it was all as if we all decided just to take a walk and all go in the same place. So. Really, when I sensed that I was hearing more than the typical background noise of sirens, you know, in the Midtown Manhattan, there's always a siren blaring about something, but I remember looking out a window and thinking, gosh, this city is noisier than ever this morning, but I still didn't know. So I went on with class, and I was teaching constitutional law, as a matter of fact, and in the middle of the class, a girl comes running into the room and says, "Mr. York, did you hear a plane crashed into the World Trade Center?" And this was, I guess, you know, shortly after the event. And my first reaction was, believe it or not, how naive we were then. I thought, oh, that's unfortunate for the plane, because I pictured like a little, you know, two-seater, some kind of thing that would have hardly dented the World Trade Center, would have probably been the end of the plane and its occupants. So I actually carried on with whatever the lesson was. And then somebody else came in and said, it's a major disaster. For one of the rare times in my life, kind of at a loss for words. And again, because we were all kind of ignorant of the full scope of it, but I said to them that, you know, we all should remain calm, that the school appeared to be a safe haven for the moment. We soon learned that all the public transit had stopped running, and that led us to a concern that we might have to house 3,000 students overnight. That was a scary thought. But we assured the students that, you know, they would be safe there, that the teachers would remain with them and make sure that, you know, they were as comfortable as we could make them, given our very limited resources. That was how we kind of continued on until we finally got further information, and I don't know whether it was from the Board of Ed headquarters. In those days, the New York City Board of Ed's headquarters was actually in Brooklyn. And eventually we began to get messages from them that we should hold the students in place because there was no safe way to send them home. And we began to try to figure out where everybody could sleep. And the gym teachers went around counting basketballs and things like that to see if we could find something to keep students busy. Gradually, the situation became clearer and some transit began running, so we got permission finally to release students You were totally unprepared. Today, of course, here at John Jay, as you know, we have disaster drills of various types. Had never been thought of in those days. We were blissfully unaware of the potential for this kind of thing to happen. So we really had no plans at all in place. And they finally dismissed the teachers on September 11th. At that point, the subways in Manhattan still were not running, and the only way from, well, fortunately the Metro North was, which is how I got home, but I had to walk from 14th Street to 44th Street, and it was a little scary. I almost felt like I was part of a disaster film because, you know, there were dozens and dozens of people just trudging along up. I decided to walk up Park Avenue, and it almost did feel like a scene out of a, you know, end of the world type movie, because we were all reduced to walking where we had to go. And it was a whole mob of people just sort of trudging, and we were still, again, even at that point, I don't think we fully grasped the magnitude of the disaster. Because you know, it was a nice day, you know, a sunny day as far as the weather, so it was all as if we all decided just to take a walk and all go in the same place. So, and yet at the same time there was kind of a feeling of gloom and doom over us, like we're walking because there is no other way to get where we need to go. It's as if we've turned the clock back from the progressive era we thought we had reached to a kind of primitive situation. So that was a little frightening. That almost seemed as if we were, you know, characters in a disaster movie, except this just was a real life disaster. Yes, yes. I think that because we were in the era sort of immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union and the breakup of the communist bloc, we had begun to feel that we were sort of entering a new golden age, that we had no longer to fear a sudden shower of ICBMs coming in to destroy us all. And it was a shock to discover that we were still vulnerable for the kind of attack that no one had really even thought about. No, I think it was more unification than it was fear and anxiety. And I give great credit to Mayor Giuliani, who was in office at that time, and to Governor Pataki, that a number of public events were organized to allow people an outlet to not only express their grief and anxiety, but also to see one another face to face and to, you know, take part in positive activity.
Brought the country
Yes,
together.
it was very inspiring almost to see, you know, so many diverse elements in our society sort of draw together, as, you know, as if we were indeed all a family, and that, you know, the family was being threatened by some outside force, and we all had to stick together. You know, if you have cousins that you barely know, and then suddenly one of them is, say, the victim of a crime, suddenly the rest of you may feel a little bit closer and a little bit more anxious to support and cooperate with one another. I think it was on a massive scale, that same kind of thing, that, you know, a lot of petty grievances and anxieties were just laid aside in the interests of sort of mutual support of one another. So if any positive result could be said to have come from such a terrible event, it might have been that. And I would have hoped it would continue. I'm not so sure it has, but you know, perhaps there's more of it than if it hadn't happened. I guess it is a couple of things. Number one, that it reminds me that we really have way more that makes us similar than makes us different. Um, you know, and I certainly, I am not a Muslim, and I am not apologist for Islam, and yet, you know, I think that our reactions were in a negative way towards Islam, and yet, if you read a little bit about the faith, there really isn't the kind of hostility that some people have thought must be there. I mean, those who acted on September 11th are not really any more representative of Islam than, say, the Roman Catholics were in the time of the Spanish Inquisition, who tortured anyone that they thought wasn't a devout Catholic. Their behavior, they claim, was motivated by their religious faith, just as the hijackers on 9/11 claimed some religious foundation for their work. Not everyone who claims a religious cloak for their activities is really a true representative of that religion. So I would say that we need to constantly remind ourselves that, you know, not every bad behavior that someone says is because of his religious faith or his national identity or his gender identity, whatever. It's not necessarily an accurate reflection of what that religion or that faith or that identity truly are. So we need to remember that we shouldn't take everything at face value, that the fact that a certain label comes attached to something may not necessarily mean that there's any legitimate basis for that label. Religions should not be taken as the blame for bad things that go on.